Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
In this edition of Global Print, I'm going to talk to you about the terrible mismanagement of the COVID pandemic, how this has led to a grim roll call of death that we see around us every day, how India on a daily basis has been breaking the global record for both deaths as well as for the rising number of COVID cases, how as a nuclear nation, India, which seeks to project both stability and responsibility, has not been able to manage even ventilators or oxygen tanks so that its citizens can breathe properly and their lives can be saved. But before that, dear viewer, I'd like to make an appeal to you. Please do subscribe and pay just a little bit for ThePrint's free, fair and unhyphenated journalism. You know that we have been bringing to you the best stories, the best videos over the past several months of the pandemic. So please do continue to support us. Now, in my column Global Print on the website a couple of days ago, I talked about how India's reputation has been severely dented by its mismanagement of the COVID pandemic. Prime Minister Modi since has cancelled all his rallies in West Bengal, which is the only state that is still undergoing an election. He has called meetings to deal with this pandemic, especially to deal with the oxygen shortage. And over the next few days, we will see how it helps deal with this horrible and very grim situation all around us. But I am using in my column the example of Bangladesh and asking several questions that Bangladesh is asking, for example, on the vaccines that it has bought from India. Now, what happened in August last year was that when the pandemic was in its first phase, all the countries around India, not just in its neighborhood, but also elsewhere in Europe, placed several orders with the Serum Institute of India, which is India's, not just India's, but the world's largest vaccine manufacturer in the world. Now, Adar Poonawala's company was given an order by Bangladesh for 60 million Covishield doses. And Bangladesh paid about $30 million for this, for about 60 million doses. It was called an at-risk funding because at the time when the vaccine was still being manufactured and Mr. Poonawala had asked the government of India as well as the European Union, for example, had a deal also with Mr. Poonawala. So Bangladesh, this little tiny neighbor in the east, asked the Serum Institute for X number of doses and it paid for them. And over the last few weeks, it has received 7 million doses plus 3.3 million. So let me just explain that a little bit. The 3.3 million, 2 million was a gift from the government of India right at the start under its Vaccine Maitri global initiative. Prime Minister Modi took another 1.2 million when he went to Bangladesh a month or so ago when he was invited as chief guest for the 50th anniversary of the Liberation War celebrations. And a few days ago, the Army Chief General M.M. Naravani, when he went to Bangladesh, he took with him another 100,000 doses, which was to gift to the people of Bangladesh. So 3.3 million was a gift from the government of India and Bangladesh paid for 7 million. It has already started vaccinating its adult population. About 6 million people have been vaccinated with one dose of Covishield from the Serum Institute, which Bangladesh has paid good money for. But what has happened is that in the last few weeks, as the pandemic's second horrible wave has unfolded, and we see what's going on around us, I don't need to tell you anymore, dear viewer. Bangladesh asked the Serum Institute for the rest of the doses that it had paid for. But the Serum Institute has said that we cannot give you anything right now. There is an unofficial ban on the Serum Institute from exporting any vaccines. Now, on the one hand, you would say that maybe that's a good thing that the government of India has done, which is that if you cannot vaccinate your own people and look at the desperate situation in which people are in today, why should you send vaccines abroad? But let me ask you to stop and think for 1 second. The first is that Bangladesh has paid for these vaccines. It's good money, it's been paid in dollars, and they had an agreement with the Serum Institute. Now, the Serum Institute is not honoring this agreement, not because it doesn't want to, but because it has been informally asked by the government of India not to export anymore. The reason I keep saying informally is because External Affairs Minister Mr. Jaishankar has said that no, there is no such ban and that people can export the vaccines. And he has also said that we want the Americans to lift their ban on the raw materials that the Serum Institute and perhaps Bharat Biotech needs to manufacture the vaccines. We don't exactly know what Mr. Jaishankar is talking about. He wants the Americans to lift a ban for raw materials. We don't, but that there is no further information on that. For the moment, the story is that Bangladesh has not got its vaccines that it paid for, and now it has asked the Chinese and the Russians for help with vaccinating the rest of its adult population. Now the question is whether the Russian Sputnik, which is again 2 doses and 2 human adenoviruses in those 2 doses, and whether the AstraZeneca, which is the Covishield that some of us in India have also been injected with, whether those are compatible, whether the Covishield is compatible with the Chinese vaccines, the Sinopharm and the Sinovac. That is something that the scientists will talk about. I do not have that information for you. But the question is, what does this do to India's word? It gave a word of honor to the Bangladeshis and to several other countries in the world. Britain has placed an order with Serum Institute for 10 million vaccines. It has received only 5. The European Union has threatened to file a case against the Serum Institute if the AstraZeneca vaccine, which it manufactures, is not delivered to it according to the agreement that it had signed with Serum Institute. So basically, the Serum Institute is under a lot of pressure to export and to honor the agreements that it has made with all these countries and with all these regions. Of course, we know by now that Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, has cancelled his visit to India because of the situation in India. And ever since, over the last couple of days, lots of other countries have banned flights from India, whether it's New Zealand, Canada, the UK, of course. The US has issued a travel advisory for its citizens not to travel to India. India is in a deep and dark and horrible place right now. We know that. We see that on a daily basis. We see that every moment, every hour. And what has the government of India done? All we see is a terrible mismanagement of the pandemic, how political parties are continuing to hold poll rallies. The Prime Minister has called off his rallies in Bengal, but we don't know if Home Minister Amit Shah is still going to continue with his rallies. Mamata Banerjee, first she truncated her rally, the Chief Minister of West Bengal. She said she promised to truncate her rallies, but now she has called them off. It has taken her some time to do that. The Congress party was the first off the block, again called off its rallies a couple of days ago. The Kumbh Mela, we know that the Kumbh Mela was that the Uttara Chief Minister, Mr. Tirath Singh Rawat, said, Ma Ganga will protect us. Nothing will happen. But until one of the senior sages, senior holy men of the Niranjani Akhada passed away, until then, the Kumbh Mela was not called off. Until then, Prime Minister Modi did not issue the orders to the holy people, to the holy men, where thousands of people were congregating on the banks of the river in Haridwar. This is not the fault of the people. This is what leaders are supposed to do. They're supposed to lead us. They're supposed to give us direction so that we can follow. But look at the messaging, the terrible messaging on the part of our leadership, which is that there is a COVID pandemic. We must mask up, but on the other hand, we have these super spreader events like the poll rallies and like religious gatherings like the Kumbh Mela, and we know, of course, about the Tablighi Jamaat, and that's another point that I raise in my article, which is that last year when the Tablighi Jamaat was, when members who had participated in that congregation in Nizamuddin East in Delhi in late March, just as the pandemic broke and the city was under lockdown, we vilified these men from several countries in the world. Bangladesh, about 200 Bangladeshis were part of that markaz. There were several hundred Indonesians. Finally, these men have been let go. The last Bangladeshis went back home last month. They had several cases registered against them under the Epidemic Act. They were told, you have to plead guilty because you have violated visa regulations. Of course, we don't know whether the sages and the holy men who participated in the Kumbh, whether they are going to be also slapped with the same violation of the Epidemic Act. Now, the question is, what does this do to India's image abroad? India is a nuclear nation. It has projected and always sought to project stability. We are a responsible power. You do not want to compare yourselves with anybody else, whether it's in the neighborhood or around. You have fought the Chinese, a much stronger power, a much bigger economic power, 5 times India's economy. You have held off the Chinese in the icy winds and the very, very cold temperatures in Ladakh. But what have you done inside the country? I'm arguing in my column Global Print that this terrible mismanagement of the COVID pandemic, where India is seen to be struggling and the world is looking at us and asking why we did not prepare for this situation when we had lockdown last year and over the last several months. How is this going to dent Prime Minister Modi's image and India's image? I leave that to you, dear viewer, to think about all these questions and to answer them. So do send in your comments and your remarks. I look forward to hearing from you. This is Jyoti Malhotra for ThePrint.